Right now, as you're watching this video, someone, somewhere in the world, is vanishing. Not dying, not leaving, just gone. Every year, over 600,000 people go missing in the United States alone. Most are found within days. Some choose to disappear. But there are cases that don't follow the rules. Cases where the evidence doesn't make sense, where the clues lead nowhere, where people evaporate from locked rooms, from the middle of crowds, from places where vanishing should be impossible. I've spent weeks digging through archives, declassified files, and forensic reports to bring you 10 disappearances that have haunted investigators for decades, sometimes centuries. These aren't urban legends. These aren't campfire stories. These are real people who walked into the fog of history and never came back. Let's begin. Number 10. Solomon Northup, 1857. You probably know the name Solomon Northup from the Academy Award-winning film 12 Years a Slave. A free black man from New York, kidnapped in 1841 and sold into slavery. After an unimaginable 12 years of bondage, he regained his freedom, wrote a best-selling memoir, and became a powerful voice in the abolitionist movement. His story should have ended in triumph. Instead, it ends in silence. In 1857, Solomon Northup finished a speaking tour in Canada and simply vanished. No death record, no burial site, no final letter. The man who had survived one of American history's greatest horrors disappeared without leaving a single trace. Some historians believe he was kidnapped again by pro-slavery forces seeking revenge. Others suggest he died of natural causes in obscurity, perhaps too traumatized to maintain public life. A few speculate he chose to disappear, exhausted by reliving his trauma for audiences night after night. Solomon Northup escaped one nightmare only to walk into another mystery that has never been solved. Somewhere, his final resting place remains unknown, his last words unrecorded. Number 9. The MV Joyita, 1955. The MV Joyita was called the yacht that couldn't sink. Its hull was lined with cork, making it virtually unsinkable even when completely flooded. On October 3, 1955, it set sail from Samoa with 25 passengers and crew. 5 weeks later, the ship was found drifting 600 miles off course, heavily listing to one side but still floating. Every single person on board was gone. The clues are disturbing. The radio was tuned to the international distress frequency. A doctor's bag was found with bloody bandages inside. 4 tons of cargo were missing. Most eerily, the engine compartment was covered with mattresses, as if someone was trying to muffle the sound of something. Investigators determined that pipe corrosion had caused slow flooding. But that raises a terrifying question. Why would 25 people abandon an unsinkable ship? One theory suggests the captain was injured or killed, causing panic among passengers who didn't understand the cork lining would keep them afloat. Others point to Japanese holdouts from World War II still operating in the Pacific, or even Soviet submarine involvement during the Cold War. The bloody bandages suggest violence. But no bodies have ever been found. Known as the Mary Celeste of the South Pacific, the Joyita proves that the ocean keeps its secrets. 25 souls trusted a ship that couldn't sink, and none of them were ever seen again. Number 8. George Mallory and Andrew Irvine, 1924. On June 8, 1924, climbers George Mallory and Andrew Irvine were spotted through a telescope roughly 800 feet from the summit of Mount Everest. Then the clouds rolled in. Neither man was ever seen alive again. In 1999, 75 years later, an expedition found Mallory's frozen body at 26,760 feet. His clothing was remarkably preserved. His personal effects were intact. But 2 things were conspicuously missing: his camera, which would prove whether he reached the summit, and the photograph of his wife that he promised to leave at the top if he made it. Did Mallory and Irvine reach the summit 29 years before Edmund Hillary and Tenzing Norgay? If the photo is missing from his wallet, does that mean he placed it at the top as promised? Irvine's body has never been found. The camera, with its potentially history-rewriting evidence, remains somewhere on the mountain, frozen in time. This isn't just a disappearance. It's a question mark at the top of the world. Somewhere under ice and stone lies an answer that could rewrite the history of human exploration. Number 7. Ambrose Bierce, 1913. Ambrose Bierce was one of America's most celebrated writers. His cynical wit in The Devil's Dictionary made him a literary legend. His short story, An Occurrence at Owl Creek Bridge, is still taught in schools today. At 71 years old, Bierce did something unexpected. He traveled to Mexico to witness the revolution firsthand, reportedly to join Pancho Villa's army as an observer. His final known letter was dated December 26, 1913. In it, he wrote, "To be a gringo in Mexico, ah, that is euthanasia." And then, nothing. No more letters, no body, no grave. Was he executed by Villa's forces? Did he die of illness in an unmarked grave? Some believe the letter itself was a suicide note, that Bierce planned his own disappearance as his final literary act, one last mystery from the master of dark fiction. Bierce spent his life writing about death, war, and the thin line between reality and nightmare. His disappearance feels almost like a continuation of his work, a final story with no ending. Number 6. The Sodder Children, 1945. Christmas Eve, 1945. Fayetteville, West Virginia. The Sodder family went to bed in their farmhouse, George and Jenny and their 10 children. A fire broke out around 1 a.m. When the chaos settled, George and Jenny had escaped with 4 of their children. 5 children were missing. Here's where it gets disturbing. The fire didn't burn hot enough or long enough to completely cremate 5 bodies. No bones were ever found in the ashes. Not a single tooth, not a fragment. The phone lines had been cut before the fire. The trucks wouldn't start, as if they had been sabotaged. And the ladder George kept for fire emergencies had been moved from its usual spot. In 1968, over 20 years later, Jenny Sodder received a photograph in the mail. On the back was written, "Louis Sodder, I love brother Frankie, Elil Boys, a 90132 or 35. The photo showed an adult man with striking resemblance to her missing son. The envelope was postmarked from Kentucky. No return address. George Sodder had been outspoken against Mussolini before the war. Some believe the Italian mafia kidnapped the children as retaliation. The family maintained a billboard near their property for decades, showing the children's faces and asking for information. George and Jenny Sodder died without ever knowing what happened to their children. The billboard stood for decades, a monument to a parent's endless hope and a mystery that may never be solved. Number 5. The Flannan Isles Lighthouse Keepers, 1900. December 26, 1900. The Flannan Isles, off the coast of Scotland. A relief vessel arrived at the remote lighthouse to find something deeply wrong. The light was out. No one came to greet them. 3 keepers, Thomas Marshall, James Duckett, and Donald MacArthur, had vanished. The lighthouse was in perfect order. The lamp was cleaned and refilled, ready to be lit. Meals sat uneaten on the table. A chair was overturned, as if someone had left in a hurry. The logbook contained increasingly strange entries. Marshall described a severe storm and the keepers crying in fear. But here's the problem. Local weather reports showed calm skies during that period. What storm were they running from? The final entry simply read, "God is over all." A rogue wave could have swept them away while checking on storm damage. But why would all 3 go out in dangerous conditions together, violating basic safety protocol? Psychological breakdown leading to violence has been suggested, but no bodies were ever found, even washed ashore. This is the quintessential locked room mystery on the scale of an island. 3 men, isolated from the world, vanished into the North Atlantic wind, leaving behind only cryptic words and an overturned chair. Number 4. D.B. Cooper, 1971. November 24, 1971. A man calling himself Dan Cooper boarded Northwest Orient Airlines Flight 305 in Portland, Oregon. He was wearing a business suit, a thin black tie, and loafers. Shortly after takeoff, he handed a flight attendant a note. "I have a bomb." Cooper demanded $200,000 in cash and 4 parachutes. He was calm, polite, and methodical. After the plane landed in Seattle and the passengers were released, Cooper ordered the crew to fly toward Mexico at low altitude with the rear stairs deployed. Somewhere over the forests of Washington state, in the middle of a freezing rainstorm, wearing only a business suit and loafers, D.B. Cooper jumped into the darkness. Despite one of the most extensive manhunts in FBI history, no body was ever found, no parachute, no briefcase. In 1980, a young boy found $5,800 of the ransom money rotting on a riverbank. That's the only trace of D.B. Cooper ever discovered. Did he survive the jump? Statistics say no. The terrain was rugged, the weather was brutal, and he had no survival gear. But no body means no closure. The FBI officially closed the case in 2016 without identifying him. D.B. Cooper is the only unsolved air piracy case in U.S. commercial aviation history. He became a folk hero, a ghost in a suit who outsmarted the system and vanished into American mythology. Number 3. Jimmy Hoffa, 1975. Jimmy Hoffa was the most powerful union leader in American history. As president of the International Brotherhood of Teamsters, he controlled the economic bloodstream of the nation. He also had deep ties to organized crime. On July 30th, 1975, Hoffa drove to the Machus Red Fox restaurant in Detroit to meet with 2 mobsters. He was never seen again. Hoffa was one of the most recognizable men in America. The FBI launched a massive investigation. They dug up horse farms, scanned football stadiums with ground-penetrating radar, and interrogated dozens of mobsters. Nothing. Not a trace of DNA, not a bone fragment, not a single shred of physical evidence. The rumors are legendary, buried under Giant Stadium, incinerated in a Detroit trash compactor, fed to alligators in a Florida swamp, dissolved in acid at a New Jersey toxic waste dump. Everyone knows the mob killed him. But how do you make a body disappear so completely that 50 years of searching finds nothing? Hoffa was legally declared dead in 1982. His disappearance remains the ultimate intersection of organized crime, labor politics, and American power. Someone knows where he is, but 50 years later, they're not talking. Number 2. The Mary Celeste Crew, 1872. The Mary Celeste is the ghost ship that defined the genre. On December 4th, 1872, the British ship Dei Gratia spotted the Mary Celeste drifting in the Atlantic Ocean near the Azores. When they boarded, what they found made no sense. The ship was in perfect seaworthy condition. The cargo of industrial alcohol was secure. Personal belongings were untouched. A meal sat on the table as if the crew had just stepped away. But all 10 people on board, including the captain's wife and 2-year-old daughter, were gone. The single lifeboat was missing. The weather had been calm. The ship was sound. Why would anyone abandon a safe vessel for a tiny lifeboat in the middle of the Atlantic Ocean? The crew had 6 months of food and water. They had everything they needed to survive. One theory centers on the alcohol cargo. Vapors from a few leaking barrels could have created an explosion scare, causing the crew to temporarily abandon ship on a tethered lifeboat. But if the line broke, they would have watched their ship sail away as they drifted towards certain death. The Mary Celeste has been studied, theorized, and fictionalized for over 150 years. It represents our deepest fear about the ocean, that even when everything seems safe, the sea can swallow you without a trace. Number 1. The Lost Colony of Roanoke, 1590. We've arrived at the oldest and most enduring American mystery. In 1587, 115 English colonists arrived at Roanoke Island, off the coast of what is now North Carolina. Among them was Virginia Dare, the first English child born in the Americas. When supply ships returned 3 years later, the colony was deserted. No bodies, no graves, no signs of struggle. The buildings were disassembled, not destroyed. The only clue was a single word carved into a wooden post, Croatoan. Nearby, the letters C-R-O were carved into a tree. The colonists had agreed on a code before the supply ships departed. If they were forced to leave under duress, they would carve a Maltese cross into a tree as a warning. No cross was ever found. Croatoan was the name of a nearby island and the tribe living there. The leading theory is that the colonists, facing starvation or disease, assimilated into local Native American tribes. Some researchers have found genetic evidence supporting this, but other theories persist. Massacre by Spanish raiders, destruction by drought and disease, or migration to the mainland where they met an unknown fate. The Lost Colony of Roanoke is the foundational mystery of American history. Over 400 years later, archaeologists are still searching for answers. 115 people left behind a single word and walked into history, never to be seen again. Croatoan. We started this investigation with a simple observation. People disappear every day. But these 10 cases aren't about statistics. They're about the limits of human knowledge, about moments when the evidence stops making sense, about questions that echo across centuries without answers. Solomon Northup escaped slavery but couldn't escape oblivion. The Joyita's 25 passengers abandoned an unsinkable ship. Mallory and Irvine walked toward the summit and into legend. Ambrose Bierce wrote his own final chapter in a letter that reads like a suicide note. 5 Sodder children vanished from a Christmas fire that should have left bones behind. 3 lighthouse keepers fled something that wasn't there. D.B. Cooper jumped into the darkness with $200,000 and a business suit. Jimmy Hoffa vanished so completely that even the mob won't talk. 10 people abandoned a safe ship and were swallowed by the Atlantic. And 115 colonists left behind a single word and walked into the fog of history. Some answers are buried too deep for history to find. Which disappearance haunts you the most? Leave a comment below. And if you want more investigations into history's darkest mysteries, make sure to subscribe and hit that notification bell. This is the Archive Investigator. Until next time.